My name is Max. I'm just a bystander in these tragic events, but fate has called me to share Sarah's haunting story. So now listen close as I relay Sarah's story, an ordinary evening gone horribly awry, a descent into unfathomable danger, the unraveling of an innocent soul. Every gut-wrenching moment will be laid bare. Out of tragedy, meaning will be forged. And Sarah, though silenced, will never be forgotten. Her story is my solemn duty to tell. I sighed as I clicked off my computer and leaned back in my office chair, rubbing my tired eyes. Glancing at the clock, I winced when I saw it was already past 11 p.m. Another long day at the office finished, my vision blurry from staring at spreadsheets for hours on end. This was not how I had envisioned my life when I first moved to the city, bright-eyed and ambitious at 22. I had pictured stimulating workdays followed by glamorous networking nights. But the reality of my corporate accounting job was mind-numbing routine and endless overtime just to keep up. Packing up my things to head home, I pushed down the nagging feeling that I was letting my youth slip away within these sterile office walls. I had big dreams once, traveling the world, starting my own company maybe. But those goals had been shelved as I struggled to pay off my student loans and afford the steep rent on my cramped apartment. The city had enchanted me at first, the culture, food, energy. But lately, the long commute on crowded trains and the lack of free time left me feeling drained and unfulfilled. I spent weekends trying desperately to recharge rather than exploring the urban sprawl outside my door. Still, quitting my job was not an option. I needed the steady paycheck, the health insurance. This just had to be a temporary rut, I told myself. One day the hard work would pay off and I could get my old ambitions back on track. For now, I just had to keep grinding and look forward to the occasional Friday night out with friends. I stifled a yawn as I made my way down the concrete steps to the subway platform. The coffee I'd grabbed after leaving work had long since worn off, and exhaustion was setting in. The platform was mostly deserted at this late hour, just a few other night owls waiting for the last train home. Checking the time on my phone, I noted it was almost midnight. The day had slipped away from me again in a blur of emails and reports. Now all I wanted was to collapse into bed and not think about work again until the morning alarm sounded way too early. The train rolled in, brakes squealing, blasting me with a gust of hot, stale air. At last, I could sit and let the soothing rhythm of the rails relax me for the ride home. I chose an empty car and sank into the hard plastic seat, letting my heavy work bag slide to the floor. Glancing around, I noted I was the sole passenger in this car. Not surprising given it was the last commuter train on a Thursday night. Everyone else was already tucked in bed like I would soon be, the work-week grind temporarily forgotten in sleep. But as the train jerked into motion, beginning its lumbering journey underground, I little suspected the ordeal that lay ahead on this night. I would not be home in bed anytime soon. The fluorescent lights flickered, casting a harsh glow over the tired beige seats and scratched windows. The graffiti-tagged walls and smell of stale air reminded me why I usually drove instead of taking the train. But my car was in the shop, so here I was. I popped in my earbuds and pulled up a playlist to unwind to after a long day at the office. Settling back, I watched the lights of the platform slip away as we picked up speed. We moved smoothly through the first few stops, braking briefly to allow passengers to disembark. But no one else boarded the near-empty car. Lulled by the rocking of the train, I let my music wash over me. The songs seemed to merge together as I thought longingly of my bed. I just had to survive a few more stops before I could collapse at home and leave the stresses of work behind for the night. I must have dozed off, because the next thing I knew, the automated announcer was calling out the next station over the intercom. I opened my eyes with a start, expecting to have to disembark soon. But when I focused out the window, I realized the platform looked unfamiliar. The sign on the wall read, Crestview Station. My brow furrowed in confusion. Crestview was one stop past mine, Rockwell Station. I sat upright with alarm, suddenly wide awake. Rockwell was my stop! But we had glided right through without even slowing down. I frantically stabbed at the button to open the doors, but of course it was useless. The train only paused for a few seconds before sliding forward again, picking up speed. My pulse quickened as I hurried up to the front of the car. Surely the conductor would realize the mistake soon and circle back to Rockwell. But when I reached the door to the engine compartment, there was no one in the driver's seat. The small space was empty. "Hello?" I called out. "You missed my stop." My voice echoed eerily in the narrow space. Unease prickled through me. Where was the conductor? For that matter, where was any staff? I made my way quickly through the other cars, calling out repeatedly. But they were all vacant. The drink carts sat abandoned. The emergency call boxes emitted only static when I lifted the receivers. It was clear I was utterly alone on this train. Panic seized me then. This driverless train was barreling into the night with no clear destination. When would it stop? How would I get home? I dug my phone out of my bag, fingers fumbling, and tried to call for help. But there was no signal. Of course not. We were likely too far underground now. I fought back the sob rising in my throat. I was well and truly trapped, severed from the outside world on this runaway machine. The rocking motion that had relaxed me earlier now felt threatening, like the train was a predator shaking me in its jaws. I didn't know where it was taking me. Would it just run express all the way to the end of the line? I sank into a seat, wrapping my arms around myself. Outside the window, the passing scenery was a disorienting blur of darkness, punctuated by the occasional platform light. The world seemed very far away now. I stared desperately at my silent phone, willing it to show even one bar of service. But the screen remained blank. No signal found. No help coming. As the train hurtled relentlessly forward, I racked my brain for any possible escape plan. Could I pull the emergency brake? Force open the doors at the next stop? But deep down I knew any effort was futile. I was well and truly trapped. Exhausted from the adrenaline and panic coursing through me, I sank down onto the floor, leaning against the doors. I just needed this nightmare train ride to be over. My eyes drifted closed even as the train continued rushing into the blackness of the tunnel. A blaring horn jolted me awake what seemed like seconds later. I blinked in the harsh fluorescent lights, momentarily confused about where I was. Then the events came rushing back. The runaway train. Missing my stop. Being trapped alone. I pulled myself to my feet, peering out the dingy window. My heart leaped with momentary relief. Finally, the train was slowing, brakes squealing as it entered a station. I didn't recognize the name on the grimy station walls, but at least it was stopping. Positioning myself by the door, I tensed, ready to jump out the second the doors slid open. This might be my one chance to escape. I just prayed my legs would carry me quickly up the concrete steps leading out of this underground prison. But the doors remained stubbornly closed. The seconds dragged by, the train idling temporarily in the station. Through the smudged glass, I could see shadowy figures standing on the grim platform. I banged on the window, shouting for help. The figures didn't react. They simply stood stiffly, not speaking or moving. Were they mannequins? Some kind of weird art installation? None looked remotely human up close. Without warning, the train lurched forward again, doors still shut tight. My chance of escape was gone. Disoriented and trembling, I retreated back into the lonely car. I didn't understand what was happening. Where was this ghost train taking me? The figures watched mutely as the train slid out of the station and back into the dark tunnel. Their stillness filled me with a dread I couldn't name. Something was very wrong here. I sank back into the hard seat, wrapping my arms around myself tightly. But I couldn't get warm in the icy chill that now permeated the train car. The faded safety instructions stuck on the wall mocked me. No one was coming to help. I was on my own. The train hurtled on relentlessly through the night, its headlights cutting a feeble swath through the thick darkness ahead. Its destination and purpose were a mystery to me. All I could do was hold on tightly and pray this nightmarish ride would end somewhere safe. But in my heart, I sensed that there was no light waiting at the end of this tunnel. Only deeper darkness. I jolted awake to find the train still speeding relentlessly into the void. Gripping the edge of my seat, I struggled to slow my panicked breathing. I couldn't fall apart now. There had to be some way to stop this nightmare. My eyes landed on the emergency brake. Of course! I should have tried that already. I lunged for the red handle, yanking it down with all my strength. The train bucked violently, nearly throwing me off my feet. Metal shrieked against metal as the brakes engaged. Finally, it was slowing. But my relief was short-lived. After the initial jolt, the speed barely decreased. We were still hurtling dangerously fast into the darkness. I pumped the brake handle desperately, but it was useless. This runaway train could not be stopped. Fighting back frustrated tears, I raced through the cars again, searching for any other way to halt the train. But all I found were rows of empty seats, abandoned newspapers, and coffee cups rolling across the floor. No one who could help me. No way out. I had to keep trying, though. As the train picked up speed even more, the world outside became an incomprehensible blur. We had to be going 70-80 mph now. With no conductor, anything could be up ahead. A stalled car, debris on the tracks. We shot out of the tunnel suddenly into the open air. Gripping the back of a seat for balance, I rushed to the window, afraid of what I would see. The train was weaving along an elevated track past decrepit warehouses and crumbling towers. Far below, the city streets were dark and empty, street lamps flickering dimly like dying embers. Jagged shadows crept through alleyways choked with overturned dumpsters and abandoned cars. What was this place? Where were all the people? The answer suddenly became clear as we passed a graffitied sign. "Welcome to Old Detroit." Understanding clicked into place. Old Detroit had been the bustling urban core decades ago. But when the recession hit, businesses shuttered, and residents fled to the suburbs, leaving it to decay. Of course, the train had brought me to this ghostly, forgotten part of the city. I gazed out in despair at block after block of abandoned buildings, like hollow husks of a lost civilization. Their broken windows seemed to stare back, daring me to try to escape into the wasteland below. Escape! If I could just break a window, I could jump. Frantically, I searched the car, looking for anything to break the glass. In the emergency kit, I found a small axe. It would have to do. Raising it over my head, I smashed it with all my might against the window pane. But instead of shattering, the window only spiderwebbed with cracks. I wailed in frustration, hitting it again and again, but the glass refused to give way. We were moving too fast anyhow. Jumping now would mean certain death. Exhausted and defeated, I sank onto the aisle floor, sweat mingling with tears. The train careened on relentlessly, its hydraulic brakes hissing mockingly at my pathetic attempts to stop it. Gripping my hair, I rocked back and forth, hyperventilating as the panic closed in. This was really happening. I was trapped on this endless voyage through purgatory, surging uncontrollably towards some unknown oblivion. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying I would wake up in my bed to find it had all been a nightmare. But when I opened them again, the spectral city still blurred past the cracked window. I was wide awake in this horror. Hugging my knees to my chest, I stared at the filthy floor. When had it last been cleaned? Did it even matter anymore? Nothing mattered now except clinging to my fraying sanity as the train rushed on. Gradually, my breathing slowed to match the clacking rhythm of the wheels over the tracks. I let the rocking of the train car lull me. Maybe if I just gave in to this journey, accepted my powerlessness, the fear would drain away. A bone-jarring impact jolted me back to high alert in an instant. The train had hit something big, enough to make it jump the tracks. Sparks flew past the windows, and an awful metal-rending screech filled the air as we tilted ominously to one side. This was it. We were going off the rails, sure to crash and burn. I braced myself for the end, almost relieved it had finally come. At least the nightmare train ride would be over. But the cars somehow righted themselves with a violent twist that slammed me against the seats. The screeching stopped, replaced by the steady click-clack of wheels on the track. We were still barreling forward, undeterred. I gaped in disbelief through the window. Behind us, a mangled chain-link fence lay flattened where we had torn through it. Yet the train showed no damage, not even a scratch of paint. How was that possible? It was almost like we were impervious, untouchable, which meant there truly was no escape. I slumped against the window, letting its cold glass leach the remaining hope from my bones. Invincible or not, this ghostly train had already crashed and burned long ago with me aboard. All that was left now was to ride it into oblivion. A beam of sunlight on my face startled me awake. I blinked, momentarily confused to find myself sprawled across the train floor as memories of the night came flooding back. The runaway ghost train, trapped alone, the endless ride through decaying darkness. But something was different now. The car was filled with light and disconcertingly silent. The engine's constant rumble and the wheels clacking over the tracks were absent. Heart pounding, I lifted my head. Outside the window, trees and underbrush stretched as far as I could see. The train had stopped at last, not at a station, but in the middle of a clearing in some dense woods. Cautiously, I stood, my joints cracking. How long had I been passed out? Long enough for the train to reach a forest in the middle of nowhere, apparently. I moved to the door, half expecting it to stubbornly remain closed. But this time it slid open easily. The sudden silence as I stepped outside was jarring. Only distant birdsong broke the stillness. The air smelled earthy and fresh, nothing like the putrid city fumes I had escaped. Scanning the shadowy trees, I listened intently for any sign of life. But nothing stirred except for a light breeze making the leaves flutter. Was the forest deserted? Where was I? Off to the right, a narrow dirt path wound away from the train tracks into the thick trees. It seemed to offer a way out of this isolated clearing. I had to find someone who could help me get home. With no better options, I started down the lonely trail. Walking slowly, I strained all my senses, hyper-alert to any unusual sound or movement. Twigs snapped in the brush, and unseen creatures rustled, making my heart race each time. But so far, only small, harmless animals crossed my path. Still, the feeling of being watched persisted. The trees crowded closer the farther I went, as if trying to trap me within the forest. Their spindly branches reached and grasped like gnarled hands. I wrapped my arms around myself, fighting the urge to run. Something sinister lurked in this place. I could feel it seeping from the damp black earth. Just when I thought the path would never end, I spotted a dilapidated wooden structure up ahead. Cautiously approaching, I saw it was an old train station, the painted sign so faded it was illegible. The planks of the walls were weathered and rotting, and the corrugated metal roof rusted through in spots. I hesitated at the entrance, uneasy about going inside. But I needed answers, so I steeled my nerves and stepped through the creaking door into the dusty gloom. Cobwebs draped the ticket counter, and a forgotten suitcase lay sprung open on a bench, its contents strewn across the floor by scavengers. Clearly, no one had been here in a very long time. I wandered through the abandoned waiting room, looking for clues to the identity of this place, and froze. Pinned to the peeling notice board was a collection of newspaper articles with alarming titles. Train derails, dozens perish in fiery crash, and black box reveals speeding train unable to stop. My hands shook as I looked closer. The articles described a deadly collision between two trains just outside the city years ago, right at this station. One train's brakes had failed, causing it to hurtle uncontrollably into the other. There were no survivors. The runaway train, the inability to stop, it all sounded hauntingly familiar. Had my ghost train been involved in this long-ago disaster? Is that why it was cursed to run forever? A distant train whistle cut through the silence, making me jump. But that was impossible. The tracks ended here at this crumbling relic of a station. Peering outside, I saw only the empty path snaking back into the brooding forest. No train could be passing. The shrill whistle sounded again, closer now. It seemed to echo all around, reverberating through my bones. This place was soaked in tragedy and death, and something did not want me uncovering its awful secrets. I fled from the station in panic, tripping over roots and dodging low-hanging branches that snatched at my clothes. The mournful whistle trailed me as I ran back up the path, growing steadily louder. Whatever sinister force inhabited these woods, I had awoken it with my presence. Bursting from the trees, nearly breathless, I spotted my ghostly train still waiting. I scrambled aboard, and the doors clamped shut immediately, sealing me in. As the train slowly lurched forward, picking up speed, the whistle faded into the distance until only the rhythmic chug of the engine remained. I had escaped for now, but answers still eluded me. The secrets of the haunted train would not come easily. All I could do was continue riding the rails and hope I didn't come face to face with the dark ghosts of the past before reaching the end of the line. The train lurched back into motion, picking up speed at an unnatural pace. I huddled in my seat, heartbeat thudding in my ears. What sinister spirits inhabited this forest? And would I ever escape them? As we left the last crooked trees behind, a frigid breeze swept through the car, raising goosebumps on my skin. In its wake, the faintest of whispers reached my ears. I strained to listen. There it was again, an eerie murmuring from no visible source. "Who's there?" I called out, though I suspected no living being made those sounds. The whispers gradually resolved into repetitive utterances carried on the icy wind. "Join us, join us." I shuddered, pulling my knees tighter to my chest. What was asking me to join it? And did I even want to know? The whispers rose and fell like a chant, swirling around me as the train hurtled on. Their hypnotic rhythm made my eyelids heavy. If I just relaxed and listened, maybe I could decipher their meaning. My head drooped forward as I teetered on the edge of sleep. But a loud clanging shockwave ripped through the car, jolting me upright. I cried out in alarm as the overhead lights flickered and died, casting everything in shadow. The temperature plunged even more, my breath coming out in icy puffs. I rubbed my arms vigorously, trying to warm them. What was happening? Why had the atmosphere turned so hostile so quickly? Shifting shapes in the darkness drew my attention. I realized with dawning horror that shadowy humanoid forms drifted silently through the aisles. Their blurred features came in and out of focus as they glided by in the dim light. I wanted to scream, to run, but fear paralyzed me. The wraith-like entities took no notice as they wandered the car with a singular purpose. As they passed, a profound melancholy emanated from them, chilling me to my core. These were not beings of flesh and blood. They were ghosts, spirits of the dead trapped in this purgatory. Perhaps even the lingering souls of those who had perished in the wreck that created this cursed train. The ghostly forms flickered in and out of existence, merging with the icy shadows. But their ominous whisper still filled the frigid air. Join us. It seemed less an invitation now than a grim command. I knew then where this train was really headed, not to any earthly destination, but to the realm of the dead. We were on a one-way ride into the abyss, and these poor ghosts wanted me to join their eternity of suffering. I cowered down between the seats, searching desperately for any escape. But the doors remained locked tight as the train continued hurtling through the endless night. There was no way out of this nightmare. The ominous chanting built to an ear-splitting crescendo, reverberating through my skull. I cried out and clamped my hands over my ears. "Leave me alone! I don't want to join you." But it was no use. The unrelenting whispers drowned out everything, even my terrified sobs. I was nothing before these omnipotent entities. Soon, my mind would be subsumed into their collective being. In a last-ditch effort, I mentally summoned every positive memory and image I could grasp onto. My family, friends, a beach at sunset. But the vengeful spirits tore through those fragile anchors like tissue paper. A frigid hand caressed my face. I shuddered involuntarily. They were done asking. My prolonged resistance had only made them more determined to absorb my essence completely. As the ghost train roared into a dark tunnel, the icy spirits surrounded me. Their clammy limbs enveloped my body in an embrace, both gentle and inescapable. Tears froze on my cheeks. "Please," I whimpered, though my words faded to meaningless silence in the deafening maelstrom. I was nothing but a hollow vessel now waiting to be filled by their tortured souls. The chilling darkness seeped through every pore, flooding my veins with ice. My breaths grew short and shallow as the spirit's melancholy soaked into my bones, mingling my consciousness with the cacophony inside them. Just before the last shreds of my identity dissolved, a raw, primal scream tore from my throat, reverberating through the tunnel. Then, my voice was extinguished, leaving only an empty shell behind. The train burst back into the moonlit night, still hurtling relentlessly toward eternity. On one seat, a girl's body sat limply, swaying. Her open eyes stared ahead blankly, reflecting only shadow. Another lost soul captured to join the ghost train's endless journey through purgatory. Its whistle echoed mournfully over the gloom-shrouded landscape as it barreled on toward its next victim. And so, the shadows of the story fade, but the chill it leaves behind lingers in the air. We hope this tale has intrigued, perhaps even unsettled you, as all good mysteries should. Thank you for journeying with us through this eerie narrative. If you've enjoyed this spine-tingling experience and wish to wander through more tales of the unknown and the unexplained, remember to like this video. And to ensure you never miss a chance to peer into the shadows with us, please subscribe to our channel. By subscribing, you become a part of our exploratory journey into the heart of darkness and mystery. So, until next time, keep a watchful eye over your shoulder, for you never know what might be lurking in the corners of your reality. Sweet dreams, and may your nights be filled with thrilling tales and haunting whispers.